Bartót. I'm Director of Strategy for Republikon Institute, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you here and of moderating the first panel. Today, we will be, by the way, can you hear me? Just some technical issue. Today we will be having two panels, two somewhat different panels and two different interpretations or approaches to this issue. In the first panel, we will have a Central Eastern European outlook. We will be discussing this a lot, but I'm sure most of you know that in three Central Eastern European capitals, in Warsaw, Prague, and Bratislava, and had local elections recently. In each of these elections, the incumbent governments lost and opposition candidates won. Of course, the parallels are clear because we also have a very strong incumbent candidate here in Budapest, and we just had the primary in Budapest to determine who is going to compete against us. In our first panel, we will be discussing this Central Eastern European outlook. I will introduce our panelists very shortly. In our second panel, which will be a Hungarian panel, we will have political analysts, activists, and researchers discuss the primary election in Hungary. Now, some of you might know that Republikon Institute is very proud these days because the primary system that was done in January, at least between some parties, is something we have long advocated. Republikon Institute has been advocating for a primary system since 2014, and even though there were politicians who advocated before, like Karácsony himself won this primary recently, so maybe if you advocate for something that might mean you might win it, but that might be too strong a parallel. So anyway, Republikon Institute has been advocating for a primary system for some time with some of its partners. We now see this happening, so obviously this is a very important time for us, but of course we will be discussing this mainly in the second panel. I also have two administrative tasks to tell you. The first one is that Republikon Institute this year is sponsored by the Europe for Citizens program of the European Union, so thank you for the generous support of the European Union. We now have posters against Mr. Juncker from the government. Thanks for that. We also have a survey which you can find on your seats, which asks you in Hungarian to evaluate this event. Please evaluate this event and distribute and get the paper back to my colleagues once the event is done. We have difficult questions like, how exciting did you find the topic of this event? I leave it up to you to decide how you give fives on each of the questions. Sorry about that. Of course, these are very important for us. And one more thing, after the second panel, we will be serving a sandwich lunch for you. So without further ado, that was the official opening, and now I have the pleasure to open our own panel. And in the first panel, as I said, we will be discussing three cities. We will be discussing Warsaw, Bratislava, Pozsony, and Budapest. And we have three speakers who I would like to introduce and ask you to stand up. Mr. Milos Hodun there, over there, who comes from Warsaw and who is an old friend of mine who is here termed as an expert of Nowoczesna, but which is of course the Liberal Party in Poland. He's a lot more. He's also on the board of the European Liberal Forum and has been instrumental in creating liberal movement in Poland. He will be talking about Warsaw. Thank you, Milos, for being here. Also, we have here Zara Jourová, did I pronounce correctly? Thank you very much for being here, who is Vice Chairwoman of the Progressive Slovakia. I'm sure she will discuss Progressive Slovakia in a bit, but it's a new centrist organization in Slovakia, which had a fundamental role in the Bratislava elections and is very active right now in the presidential elections, which are taking place in Slovakia shortly, so we'll also have a chance to talk about that. And third speaker is from Hungary, Bence Erdős, who I'm sure the Hungarian speakers know, Member of Parliament for Párbeszéd Dialogue for Hungary group, and he will be obviously discussing the Budapest case. The way we will do this is we will have short presentations or talks from our speakers. Then we will go upstairs, have a short discussion, and then leave the room open for questions. So that's the format. Thank you again for being here, and I will now give the floor to our first speaker, coming from Warsaw. Milos, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Shaba. Thank you so much for having me here. It's always a pleasure to be at Republican's event. I learn a lot during these events, and I hope this one will not be any different. I have a short presentation. It's mostly pictures, just to give you a clue who or what I'm talking about, some visuals. So I'm going to talk about the Warsaw municipal elections in Poland that we had last year in November, but also about the regional and local elections in general, because you cannot talk about Warsaw without talking about the rest of the country. So, as Csaba said, I'm representing Nowoczesna, which is Polish Liberal Party. I was a member of the national campaign team of the coalition that we created for these elections last year, and they were pretty successful for us, and I will explain you why. But then at the end, also I'll tell you what are the disadvantages of this coalition that we discovered only after the elections. So it's not all so sweet. Okay, so of course, if you talk about Polish politics, now everything starts with this man, Jarosław Kaczyński, leader of Law and Justice Party, the party who won the elections in 2015. It's the first time in Polish modern history after 1989 when one party has a majority in both chambers of the parliament. One party has the prime minister, the president. As you may know, I believe in Hungary you know, that he also packed the constitutional court. He has absolute control over the media, so he's learning a lot from your prime minister, and he's saying it openly, right? Like his party is saying we want Budapest in Warsaw, and this is what they are trying to do. They're trying to build this like soft authoritarian regime, illiberal democracy, however you want to call it. It was 2015 when he won these elections. It was also the year when my party, Nowoczesna, meaning the modern, was created. We entered the parliament with almost 8%, and we're still there. But the elections in 2015, the local and regional elections, were our first local and regional elections, so very important. Why we found last year's elections crucial for Poland? Because, as I mentioned, Jarosław Kaczyński and Peace, Law and Justice, they have everything on the national level. So 16 regions we have, and our cities especially, as the only enclaves, as the only bastions of opposition, of freedom. Cities and regions could do and can do things that the government does not want to do on the national level. So they can introduce programs for minorities, for LGBTQ. They can introduce, they can sponsor IVF procedures. They can sponsor programs for refugees and migrants. So our cities took many of the responsibilities that we, people in the opposition, now we believe that the government should do, but they don't. So for us it was crucial to keep the power in the regions and in the cities. And this is the map of Poland before this elections in November. As you can see, 15 out of 16 regions were in hands of today's opposition, of the coalition of Civic Platform and the Polish People's Party, the Agrarian Party. The green ones are the regions where the Polish People's Party has the president of the region. The orange ones is where Civic Platform has the president of the region, and there was only one region, the Subcarpathian region in the corner, which was governed by peace. So 15 out of 16 was in hands of opposition. So it means that the opposition was basically doing all the politics there, was also distributing the money from the European funds. Super important. It's even more clear. I know the faces are not familiar, but it's even more clear if it comes to the mayors of Polish cities. So 16 mayors of 16 capitals of the regions, none of them was a peace member. They're all members of opposition parties or independents. Actually, peace was very weak in the city. It still is. But before the last year's elections was very weak in the city. The biggest city they were managing, they had the mayor was really like 20-something biggest city. So it was actually a town, not a city. Everything the city actually was ruled by the opposition. So we also we knew that we have to do everything to defend that. And then we have Warsaw, which is a country in a country, right? It's a very I believe it's the same here, and probably in Slovakia also. We're the capital city. It's a country by itself. It's the most liberal, the most progressive, it's the most open-minded city in Poland. Had been ruled for 12 years by Hanna Gronkiewicz-Waltz from Civic Platform, professor of economics, former governor of the National Bank, a very successful mayor, I believe, very popular one. If she had decided to run again, probably she would have won last year again, but she decided not to after 3 terms. So our main task was to how to defend Warsaw, how to keep Warsaw in hands of us opposition, and the same with other cities. And what we did, so we built this coalition. We built the coalition of Civic Platform, which was the biggest Polish opposition party, the party that was in the government, that led the government for 8 years before peace, and Nowoczesna, so us. Why we did it? So first of all, because we did the math. We know the electoral law and we know the math. So Polish electoral law in municipal and regional election, the same as the parliamentary election, is based on the DON system, the system that promotes the biggest party. The winner does not take it all like in Italy or something, but the winner gets a huge bonus. Only big parties can really compete in these elections. Even more so in regional and local elections, where the constituencies are smaller than in the parliamentary elections. So in elections in 2018, many of our constituencies were of 5 or 6 seats. We're electing only 5 or 6 council members in the constituencies. So even if a threshold officially is 5% in the constituency of 5 or 6 seats, effective threshold is 12% or can even be 15%. So, and as I said, we knew the math. We knew that Civic Platform was polling at 20–25%. Nowoczesna was polling at 5%, maybe 6%. With 5 or 6% support on the national level, you will get smashed if it comes to the seats. Because, as I said, the effective threshold in many constituencies is higher than 10%. So you can get really over 1 million votes in the country, and in all the regional assemblies, you will get 1, 2, or maybe 3 council members, and that's it. What's the consequence of it? The biggest party is promoted. The biggest party gets the bonus. So peace gets the bonus. So we knew that we needed each other just to get the seats, because our 5%, combined with 25% of Civic Platform, just gives us extra mandates, because we are getting closer to peace and we are really competing for extra mandates that will allow us to have the majority in many of the cities and of the regions. So simple math. This is what we had to do, and we did it. It was successful. So we created this coalition. We called it Civic Coalition. The full name was actually Platforma Nowoczesna Civic Coalition. So the names of both parties were there. We're presenting it as a coalition of 2 equal partners. Both party leaders were touring the country and promoting the candidates. And Polish people really liked it. So we not only got the bonus because of the system, but also we got the bonus from the people who really liked we cooperate. The moment we showed that we cooperate, Polish people appreciated and gave us more support, and we also polarized the voters, but I will talk about it in a second. And coming back to Warsaw, so Nowoczesna, my party, was the first party to present its candidate in this election circle. The guy in the white shirt, Paweł Rabie, was our candidate. He was very progressive. He came out as gay in national TV in 2016. It was a big thing. There is not many openly gay politicians in Poland. He was one of them, and he was our candidate. But when we decided to sign the coalition with Civic Platform in Warsaw, we supported their candidate, who was Rafał Trzaskowski, the guy in black T-shirt. So they created this team, and Rafał Trzaskowski immediately said that if I win, Paweł will be my deputy mayor. We're like running mates, running together. Yeah, the picture is from the Pride in Warsaw. So they were actually leading the parade together. And so we did everything to support Rafał as mayor, but also he supported Paweł as his running mate and as his candidate for deputy mayor. But coalition was not only this in Warsaw. So when we entered this coalition with Civic Platform, we had 2 goals, especially in Warsaw. So our first goal was to have our candidate win, and also to get the majority in the city council. So to convince people that we are the alternative, we are better, especially than PiS, but also than everyone else. But our second goal was to convince the people that our Nowoczesna candidates are the best on the common coalition lists. In Poland, we have a preferential vote system, so voters decide who from the list will be elected. So even if you are number 1 on the list, it's not a guarantee that you will be elected if the number 2 or 6 gets more votes. So we were also running the campaign for our candidates, showing that they're a bit different on the list, that they are more progressive, they are more urban, and Also, it was a very successful campaign, and especially our colleagues from Civic Platform, they were surprised. Because many of them, of our coalition partners, politicians, they were in politics for 20 years. They do business as usual. They think they'll get re-elected. And we introduced these candidates who were running for the first time. They were all newcomers, all of them. So they were running a really enthusiastic, energetic campaign, and our coalition partners were like, "Whoa, what's going on? Like, why they are all over?" When our mayor candidate has a press conference, it was always like 20 Nowoczesna people behind him, because our people were like, we need to campaign. And actually, what happened? So the success of these elections in Warsaw was actually way bigger than we expected. So first of all, our mayor candidate, Rafał Trzaskowski, was elected in the first round, not expected by many, with 58%, not expected by anybody. And of course, this with PiS candidate, who was number 2, he got 29%. So it was 20% of a difference, a huge difference. No one really expected it. And because our candidate was so successful, also our list to the city councils, they succeeded so much. So we got 40 out of 60 seats in Warsaw City Council, and 10 of them is Nowoczesna. So Nowoczesna, as a party, is right now third biggest party in Warsaw, which is very important for us. Also, what's important for us, I know you cannot see it, especially from the distance, we got our seats in every single constituency in Warsaw. So our candidates were really fighting everywhere, even in the districts that are not typically Nowoczesna, because they're more they're socially more challenged. But yeah, so first of all, in Warsaw, we polarized the opinion. We polarized the electorate. We showed the electorate that they have only one choice. To protect Warsaw, they have to vote for Rafał Trzaskowski and Civic Coalition. There is no other option. So we smashed everyone else. PiS only 19, Social Democrats only 1. The Warsaw City Council before last elections looked totally different. The graph was way more colorful because there were more parties, more local associations. But we polarized this election so much, saying that the coalition is the only alternative, that really everyone who was against PiS voted for us. And the same happened, I know, again, it's not very, very clear for you, but we did the same in 18 Warsaw districts, because Warsaw is divided in 18 districts, and we also vote for the councils there during the election day. We smashed them. Like normally in the districts, local associations, local parties are very powerful, but because we polarized so much on the Warsaw level with our candidate and with our campaign, also in the districts, we won basically everywhere, and right now we're governing in all the districts, if I'm not mistaken. I think in all of them, Nowoczesna has 10 deputy mayors in all the districts, so it's pretty good for a newcomer. Oh, one more thing I really want to mention and underline is the super balance that we got. So out of 10 Nowoczesna Warsaw council members, we have 5 men, 5 women. Out of 32 district council members, we have 16 men and 60 women. And out of 2 Nowoczesna, the region council members, we have 1 man, 1 woman. So we got a perfect balance in our voters. They got the perfect balance. Also, I want to tell you one more thing about the Poland as such. So first of all, bad news. We, as the opposition, we lost 7 of the regions. Now PiS is governing or co-governing with the coalition partners in 8 of the regions. We, as the opposition, we govern in 8 of the regions. And going back to the math, because we did this coalition, Nowoczesna has now 30 council members in all the regional assemblies, which means that without these 30 council members, we wouldn't be ruling with our partners in 8 of the regions. Only because we joined together, we could get this bonus. Just small comparison, what happened if we were not running the coalition but by ourselves. There's 2 other parties that are similar in size to us. In 2015, there were 3 parties that entered Polish parliament with more or less 7-8%. It was not us, it was Kukiz 15, the anti-establishment party, and it was the Left Alliance. We all scored about 7-8%. In these elections, Kukiz 15, the anti-establishment, and Left Alliance, they scored both around 7%. Kukiz 15 has 0 representatives on the regional level because of the DON system and the small constituencies. Social Democrat Alliance, they have 11. We being in a coalition and polling lower than they, we got 30. So, and without this 30, there will be less of the orange spots on this map, because PiS will benefit from the fact that we are not in. So just that. Yeah, of course, like we got elected a few mayors for the first time for Nowoczesna, council member, more than 200 council members all over the country. So for us, the coalition was a success, and we were saying it very loud. And now I will just go very briefly what happened later, because this is the most difficult part for us. So it was not all so so shiny and beautiful. So because these elections were a success for Nowoczesna, for a small, extremely poor party, extremely poor compared to our coalition partners, who's loaded with money. And we were talking loud about the success. Our coalition partner did not really like it. And being really way bigger party, they used all means to end the life of the party, to end the life of our party. They used all means basically to incorporate our party into their party, including what they did in December is that they attracted, the offer was clear, so they attracted our group leader in the parliament, very popular MP, to join Civic Platform, and she did because she was offered number 2 on the Warsaw list to the European Parliament. She also took a few backbenchers from our party. We lost the group in the parliament. We rebuilt it, don't you worry. We rebuilt it, we are still kicking, and I could talk more and more about like what we are doing now, what type of a coalition we are building for the EP election. This is going to be very different, and we learn a lot from that experience. And yeah, I guess this is it for now. And probably I already talked too much, so there will be time for questions. Thank you so much for listening, and yeah, and good luck with your coalition.
Thank you so much, Milos. I think this was a very important presentation. I always find that sometimes we in Hungary we like to talk about Germany and UK and France, and maybe that's one of the reasons of this event. We can learn a lot more from some of our Central European friends. I looked at some of our Hungarian guests and politicians, and some of the statements you said resonated very clearly of big party, small party, coalition intention. So you made a persuasive case on cooperation, but the Slovak cases were different, as I understand, also because of the electoral system. So I now give the floor to Zora, and the floor is yours. They also had presidential elections, so she might talk a bit more, but after 20 minutes I will intervene, definitely.
Hello, good morning. Also, I'd like to thank you for inviting me here, and I'm always impressed by how many people are interested in this kind of issues. It's not always the case. As Csaba said, I'm the vice chairwoman of Progressive Slovakia, which is one of the newest political parties in Slovakia. It's a liberal party. We are now the ALDE member. And we are, doing everything to do a really good result in next parliamentary elections. The story I want to tell you is a story about municipal elections in Bratislava, which took place in last November 2018. And the reason why I think it's interesting is that it's very significant not only for the city of Bratislava, but also for entire change of political landscape, not only in Slovakia, but according to my opinion, also in Central and Eastern Europe. I start somewhere, which is something which is totally not political, but at the beginning of 21st century, there were a lot of new ideas and theories about how the cities should be run and should be managed and should be led by not only politicians but also other leaders. I think what has changed profoundly was that cities started to become places for living, not for sleeping. And also, and maybe you've heard of Richard Florida, who was a very, very famous American sociologist. He actually found out that in 21st century, what is the main asset of the cities is their ability to attract and retain creative and innovative people, because that basically change the landscape, and that makes cities successful. And this is a entire complex of urbanistic approaches and policy approaches to the city development, which are going on in Western Europe for decades now. The trouble is that if we come to Central and Eastern Europe, it's quite apparent that most of the cities did not adopt these strategies, and they are late adopters. And as the time goes by, and as the time went by, a lot of those cities and people living in the cities and a certain generation of people who are traveling around Europe start to feel a total gap between what's going on in the cities in Europe and what's going on in Central and Eastern Europe. This picture is the suburban area of Bratislava called Petržalka, which is on the other side of the Danube than the center, and that's the largest ex-Soviet settlement in, I think, in the whole Europe, basically. So what I wanted to say by this is that we are dealing with slightly different issues than, for example, cities in western part of the Europe, and that has a lot of implication also on political leadership of those cities. And this is very important for the story of Bratislava and for what happened afterwards, because many of those ex-Soviet cities, if it comes to political strategies, one of the main issues they had to deal with was that there were no long-term vision of the cities, there were no long-term political strategies, and very often, basically, the communal or municipal politics was ignored in comparison to the big national politics, and it was not taken as something important or as something which will change the political landscape of the country. That was very much the case of Bratislava as well. Bratislava deals with many issues. They are different from maybe Warsaw or Budapest or other cities in the region. One of them is that it's probably the youngest capital or one of the youngest capitals in Europe. That basically the whole country, including the capital city, is still searching for the identity because it exists only since 1993. Also historically, Bratislava was always this nice little town near to Budapest and Vienna, where all the nobility had their summer residences, and before 50s it had only 50,000 citizens. Now it has 500,000. So basically all those people moved in the city from all the country over the last 50 years. And that also creates a problem of like missing local patriots or missing people who are connected to the city. Okay, so now I think the right moment, and maybe I will be very personal in this story because in a few moments of the story of Bratislava, I was involved in that story in different roles, and I was born in Bratislava, and this is pretty much the story of my life and my generation. Probably 15 years ago, there was one Dutch photographer who married a Slovak designer, and she moved to Bratislava, and she was very active, and she was somebody who totally cared for the city and for its urban development. And she came with the idea of making something which is called Wood Market. Now it's very, very popular event, but she did it 15 years ago for the first time, and it sounds like a very, very banal thing which happens everywhere, but for Bratislava this was the starting point of change. What they did is something which is done in Amsterdam or Utrecht every Saturday. They closed one street in the city center, they created market, they invited people. And as I said, it sounds very banal, but that day, all my generation of Bratislava citizens been there, and it was a vast success. And for the first time in my life, I had the feeling that there is a new generation of people in Bratislava who really care for the city and who want to change it. And it created the first critical mass of people who started to think about the city and about how to change it. The other thing I think which was very important was the project of European Capital of Culture, which was done in Košice. It's not Bratislava, it's on the other side of the country. I was actually co-author of this project, but the reason why I'm mentioning it here was that was the first time in Slovak history when a city created a long-term strategy of development which was modern, which was pro-European, and which had a lot of implication to political leadership of the city. And that was again an example that city can be run differently and the factors of the success can be different than we saw before. And the third moment when I felt this experience of critical mass this is a city hall. You see the Hungarian writings there. This is a city market hall in Bratislava. It's the total center of the city, in the middle of the center. It exists since 1905, and for maybe 20 years, it was a total neglected public space in the city center, run by the city. It was empty, there was nothing. We've been going around it, and it was a shame for everybody that this place looks like this. After all these uprisings of local pride and local patriotism I mentioned before, one day we created a group of people. It was organized by one guy who is actually Hungarian, by the way, Slovak Hungarian, Gabo Bingic, he's somewhere there, number 4. And he put together a group of professionals from very, very different professional backgrounds. And we came up with the project how to revive the old market hall, and we proposed that project to the city council. And it was a totally new approach to how to deal with the public spaces, basically in Bratislava. And there was a lot of politics and corruption going on in the background. We did it in very participative process. We discussed that with citizens. We did a very transparent process with journalists, so we cannot be accused of making some corruption deal with the city council. And at the end of the day, this project, which was again a banal project in Bratislava, became a symbol for certain generation in the entire Slovakia, how people can actually win over corrupted politicians and how people can actually make the city better. And to me, that was very interesting experience that I was getting messages from people from Eastern Slovakia saying, oh, we are so happy for you that you succeed. You remember that picture of this alliance, remember the guy number 2, because he will be very important in my story. After these projects with the old market hall was started, now it's extremely successful project. If you are in Bratislava, please come. They organize markets, they organize cultural events. It's one of the hubs in Bratislava now, and it's a great example of public-private partnership, how city can actually be revived. All those examples, I think, has brought to many of us who were involved in many of them, this question how you can actually change your city or the political landscape of the place where you live, because many of them were bottom-up, but we also more and more started to have the feeling that, okay, the activism is fine, but it has some limits. And if you want to facilitate a profound change, you also need the bottom-up approach. And also, of course, the main trouble in all those processes is that we desperately need a new type of leaders, people who are able to grasp this kind of new principles. Maybe you know the guy in pink. It's the famous Jon Gnarr, who was for several years the mayor of Reykjavik, who won with his farce Best Party. It was just sort of like stand-up comedian, but at the end he was one of the best mayors of Reykjavik, and he went the city out of the economical crisis. So this whole situation has given the birth to several projects in Slovakia, some of them political, some of them activists, but at the same time, the Progressive Slovakia, at that time, it was 2016, it was the NGO, now it is political party, has been created with the aim to change the landscape of the country. And at the same time, the guy you saw on the picture, the architect who was part of our alliance in Old Market, Matúš Valo, he decided he would run for the mayor of Bratislava. He decided in 2016, the elections were in 2018, yeah, he came up with the idea how to actually do that. He is a very successful architect, and for 15 years he organized this project called Urban Interventions, which was a project where they basically engaged people to solve some urban issues in different cities. He organized it in more than 20 cities in Slovakia and Czech Republic, and that's why he had a lot of knowledge about how the modern cities can exist. So, at the beginning, he came with the idea of Plan B, or Plan Bratislava, and at the very beginning, it was not about his political ambitions. It was about, again, putting together an alliance of professionals, of people from Bratislava, who can come up with the idea, with the strategy for the city. At the end of the day, we had 76 people working on that plan. I was one of them, but we had people from all different areas. Most of them really outstanding experts in what they do. And we've been working for 2 years in maybe 15 working groups on a very large study, or we called it Recipe for a Better City. So it's a strategical plan for how to change the city in next 15 to 20 years with overall vision, but also very concrete steps and strategies in different areas. It was published in the form of a book. It was published by, before it was published, there was a crowdfunding campaign for publishing, which raised 5 times more money than they asked for. So people pre-ordered several books for themselves, but you could also pre-order book for each of the council members, so they get the book and they would know what to do. And this crowdfunding campaign was very successful, and that was the first sign that this strategy works and people really like it. 3,000 copies were sold in the stores, and it was not cheap book. It was very high quality print and everything. So it was not just something you would be giving to people for free, but people really wanted to buy it because they cared for the city. So this book was published. The entire plan was also published online. So, and Matúš Valo, he always declared, yes, okay, I will probably run for the mayor, but this plan is for everybody to use, also for my counter candidates, whoever will run the city. Here is the plan, here is how to do it. And it was crowdsourced and crowdfunded by people from this city. So after this book was published and the process was done, the next, this was the professional part of the process, then it came the political part of the process. We created something which was called Team Valo, and it's very, from a political point of view, it's very interesting how the team was created, because the electoral system in Slovakia is different than it is in Poland. It's a direct voting system, so you don't vote for parties, you vote directly for mayor and for the city council members, no matter from what party they are. That means that the political background of candidates is not that important than it is in the system where you vote for the party candidates. But at the same time, it gives a certain value for the candidates. What we actually did was that we created this very specific coalition of Progressive Slovakia, which already existed as a party. There is another party, like a doppelganger of Progressive Slovakia called Spolu, which is also a new party, but slightly different from Progressive Slovakia because it was created from already existing parliament members who were before in other parties, but in terms of values and worldview, they are very close to us. And we created a coalition of those two parties and also of Team Valo, which were some of the experts. They've been working on Plan B, and they didn't want to be a political candidate, but they wanted to be in the Team Valo. So from the marketing point of view, what was very important was that on one hand, there were these new political parties. They are symbol of hope in Slovakia and symbol of new type of politics. But also there was the roof brand of Team Valo, which was declaring that, okay, it has a lot to do with the politics, but we also have experts, we also have people who don't want to do the big politics, but they want to help the city. So this feeling of being together, like putting together resources, finances, people, whoever who want to really help the city, was very important part of the campaign and of the message, basically, which was given to people. These are like just a few things. These are just a few things that I think were like the keys to the success of the campaign. First, that he started really early, and it took for more than 2 years. He did very good communication. He communicated about everything which was done. The campaign was very much focused on online, partially because that was the recommendation of the agency which done the campaign, but partially also because the offline part of the campaign was already taken by the traditional candidates. For the first time in Slovakia, we did a very massive door-to-door campaign, and we did a very massive crowdsourcing and crowdfunding campaign. So people were actually giving a lot of money to this, which is the first step to actually vote for somebody. The challenges, the main challenge actually Matúš Valo had to face, and is the challenge also of new political parties like us, was the low recognizability of him, especially in comparison to the counter candidates, because apart from the incumbent from the mayor who was running for the second time, the other counter candidate was very popular media manager who was the head of the successful private television and then head of the state television, and he had all kind of media campaign you can imagine. Here you can see on data how were the polls during the campaign and how they work with the recognizability. We have to say that Matúš Vala was always, like at the beginning, as you could see, he was total outsider. All my friends, political marketers, told me he has absolutely no chances, it's impossible. Basically, he had to do two campaigns. One was about the recognition first, and also after people knew him, then he could do the real campaign with the content and everything. But you could see that the polls in September, he was still on the third place of all the candidates. In October, it was still the third place. But then he won really like 36 and the second one was 26. So it was like really clear victory. What I think was the absolutely underlying message which won the election was that he said, I have a team. He ran not only by himself but with 35 people. I have a plan I was working on with other 80 people, and I am local and I want to change the city. The reason why I was trying to tell you this story maybe in a bit broader context is that this victory of Matúš Vala in Bratislava again became a symbol of like hope, or of something that you can actually change the existing landscape, political landscape, and then the old rules of political marketing are not that unshakable anymore, and then you can basically change the place and people have the power basically. It's that easy. Now, something very similar is happening with the presidential elections in Slovakia. We are in the high point of campaign at the moment because the first round will be 16th of March. We as Progressive Slovakia, we have a candidate. She's also the vice chairwoman of Progressive Slovakia, a very successful lawyer who has a Goldman Prize for defending people against the government. And it's very much the same team doing her campaign than was the team in Matúš Vala campaign. But something very similar is happening, that she as a total outsider, as a liberal candidate, as a woman, all the political marketers said, no way she will be even on the third place. Now it looks like she has a very, very high chance to get it to the second round and also to win. We will see, and we are doing the best. And we also, because we had this coalition with the other parties, Spolu, in Bratislava election, and it was taken as a very successful case. We are also running for European elections together, and we hope that this will somehow build on the success of the previous coalitions. So, yeah, last sentence. If basically I think, and it's again, it sounds banal and it sounds like a cliche, but my experience from all these stories and from all these basically success stories so far is that what we need to give to people is a hope, which is an alternative to the fear. Because at the moment, people are full of fear against everything and mainly against the future. And if we are able to show them that there is a generation which can change the status quo and which can give the hope to people, then to me, this was the key to the success in the city, and this is the key to the success in other political projects. Sorry for being so long. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. No, I think it was really good that you explained in detail how this came about. I think for us in Budapest, in front of a mayor election in just half a year, all these experiences are really crucial. And we will have a chance to discuss it. But now I will change to Hungarian, and I will give the floor Bence. Úgyhogy akkor a következő vendégünk, aki magyar közösségre tekintettel abban maradtunk, hogy magyar nyelven fog beszélni, Tordai Bence, aki meghallgatta ezt a két előadást is, beszél egy kicsit arról, hogy Magyarországon, Budapesten milyen tervei lehetnek az ellenzéknek arra, hogy visszavegye, vagy megszerezze, vagy új reményt adja Budapestnek. Bence.
Köszönöm szépen, üdvözlök mindenkit, sziasztok! És valóban elsősorban a Facebookon velünk lévő kedvéért magyarul fogok beszélni, és nagyon röviden, mert ugye a budapesti történetet azt hiszem, hogy mindannyian elég jól ismerjük, úgyhogy csak a legfontosabb pontokat emelném ki, és ott kezdeném, ahol Csaba, hogy két csapat volt Magyarországon, akik az előválasztásban hittek, akik az előválasztásért dolgoztak. Egy szakmai, egy think tank, a Republikon Intézet, akiknek a szakmai anyagára is támaszkodva a Párbeszéd volt a másik, aki már 3-4 éve azt tolja, hogy igen, mondjuk be az embereket ebbe a döntésbe, és válasszuk ki közösen, hogy kik legyenek a jelöltek. Azért is, mert abban hiszünk, hogy a demokrácia így működik, és azért is, amit Milosz mondott, mert ismerjük a matekot, és tudjuk, hogy Budapesten is, mindenhol máshol az országban az együttműködés használ csak a Fidesz ellen. De miután én politikus vagyok, és nem fényezhetem magunkat korlátlanul, ezért méltányosan meg kell említeni, hogy szuper, hogy volt két csapat, aki tudta, hogy ezt kell csinálni, de azért jöhetett ez létre, mert lett egy harmadik, aki szintén elkezdett hinni benne, és hogyha az MSZP nem dönt úgy, hogy beleáll ebbe az előválasztásba, akkor ez most sem valósult volna meg, úgyhogy köszönet innen nekik is, ahogy a DK-nek és a Szolidaritásnak, és hát tegyük hozzá azt is, hogyha nincs egy elég aktív és jól látható önjelölt főpolgármesteri jelölt, akkor pedig nincsen egy ilyen unortodox előválasztás, egy kétfordulós előválasztás, ami a mostani konferencia címét is adta, előválasztás után, előválasztás előtt. Úgyhogy tulajdonképpen köszönjük a vetélytársaknak is, hogy vannak, mert anélkül nincsen működő demokrácia. Nézzük meg, hogy siker volt-e, pontosabban miért volt siker ez az előválasztás, vagy a budapesti főpolgármesteri előválasztásnak az első fordulója, és én 3 szempontot tartok e tekintetben különösen fontosnak. Az első az, hogy bevonjuk az embereket a kampányba, a döntésbe, a második az, hogy feltegyük a politikai napirendre ezt a témát, Budapest ügyét, általában azt, hogy milyen városban szeretnénk élni, a harmadik pedig, hogy megtaláljuk tényleg azt a jelöltet, aki egységes ellenzéki támogatottsággal képes lesz a nálunk is erős, inkumbens és az országos hatalom által támogatott jelöltet, a Fidesz helytartóját, Tarlós István legyőzni. No, hát azt hiszem, hogy ez a bevonás, ez abszolút sikeres volt. A konferencia leírásában is promotáltatok ezt a számot, hogy 34 000 ember vett részt ebben az előválasztásban. Ez összehasonlítva olyan országoknak a hasonló adataival, ahol évtizedek óta ez a bevett gyakorlat, is egy teljesen szép szám, felzárkóztunk, első ugrásra elértük gyakorlatilag a nyugat-európai vagy az amerikai előválasztásoknak a részvételi arányát. És úgy tűnik, hogy az emberek beleszerettek ebbe a gondolatba, ahogy jártunk az utcán, jártunk a piacokon, jártunk a közösségi közlekedés, a tömegközlekedés járművein, Gergővel, mint főpolgármester jelölttel, folyamatosan jöttek be az inputok, a felvetések, a kérdések. Az látszott, hogy az emberek elkezdték magukénak érezni a jelöltet, elkezdték magukénak érezni a témát, és tetszett nekik az, hogy beleszólhatnak abba, hogy ki képviselje őket a Fidesz hatalommal szemben. Úgy tűnik, hogy most nem csak 34 000 regisztrált választót nyertünk, hanem tulajdonképpen 34 000 nagykövetet az előválasztás és később a polgármester választás ügyének, akik egyszer már beletettek időt, energiát, tájékozódtak, elmentek, korábban regisztráltak, vagy ajánlást adtak, azok eléggé elkötelezettek ahhoz, hogy személyesen is fontos legyen számukra ez az ügy, ajánlják a barátaiknak, az ismerőseiknek, a családtagjaiknak. Tehát egyrészt nyáron, a második fordulójában az előválasztásnak, másrészt októberben a főpolgármester választáson, számítunk rájuk, mint tulajdonképpeni aktivistákra vagy nagyköveteire az ügynek, ha úgy tetszik. És az a szlogen, vagy az a mondat, az a gondolat, amit Karácsony Gergely sokszor ismételgetett a kampányban, hogy a hatalom embereivel szemben az emberek hatalmát szögezzük, az pontosan ezt jelenti, hogy az emberek ráébrednek a saját hatalmukra, nem tudom, az empowermentre van-e valami jó magyar szó, sose találok, de hogy tényleg a tudatára ébred mindenki annak, hogy a döntésének, a jelenlétének, az aktivitásának súlya és jelentősége van. És ez jelentős részben az előválasztásnak köszönhető, és itt átmennék a második kritériumra, hogy sikerült-e feltenni a napirendre ezt a témát, sikerült-e közel egy évvel a tényleges választást megelőzően már arról beszélni, hogy lesz kihívója Tarlós Istvánnak, lesz esélyes kihívója Tarlósnak, és ez egy közös jelölt lesz, az kell, hogy legyen. Megépült ez a gondolat, megépült az, hogy aki ma Budapesten politikai pártként az ellenzékben létezni akar, az nem teheti meg, hogy ezt megkerüli, és kialakult az a közös érdek, hogy erről beszéljünk, és nem másról, arról beszéljünk, hogy ki milyen Budapestet akar. És ehhez tényleg komoly segítség volt az, hogy volt egy ilyen erős önjelölt, komoly segítség volt az, hogy volt az MSZP-nek is egy erős jelöltje, a Párbeszédnek is egy erős jelöltje, és elkezdődhetett arról a diskurzus, hogy megfelel nekünk budapestieknek az a városvezetési stílus, az a városvezetési gyakorlat, amit az elmúlt 9 évben Tarlós István részéről tapasztaltunk. És egyre többeknek válik világossá, hogy itt van egy olyan vezetés, ami egyrészt kiszolgáltatott az országos hatalomnak, nem rendelkezik saját koncepcióval, vagy azt nem tudja érvényesíteni, és Budapestet, a várost nem az emberek élőhelyének, hanem egy hatalmi kulisszának tekinti. Tehát kialakulnak itt az alternatív víziók, és ebben egyébként elég hasonlóak az ellenzéki főpolgármester jelöltek, legalábbis egy pontig egymás mondani valóját erősítik. Nem hiszem, hogy program alapon voltak az igazán komoly ütközések eddig sem, sőt azt láttuk, hogy a Horváth Csaba és Karácsony Gergely közötti meccs az nagyon kultúrált, nagyon visszafogott, a másikat tiszteletben tartó és ilyen módon a politikai kultúrát is fejlesztő nemes versengés volt, és abban tényleg segítette az egész budapesti közösen gondolkodó közösséget, hogy az, hogy milyen város szeretnénk magunknak, hogy legyen egy olyan stratégiánk, vagy legalábbis egy olyan jövőképünk, amilyen Bratislavának, Pozsonynak van, ahogy Zora azt elmondta nekünk. Szóval, hogy ehhez hozzásegített minket egyértelműen, és lehetővé tette azt, hogy decemberben, januárban, februárban már arról beszéljünk, amiről normális esetben a korábbi választások tapasztalatai alapján csak augusztusban, szeptemberben kezdtünk volna el beszélni. Tehát a tudatosság, a készültség, ez sokkal erősebb most így az ellenzéki oldalon. És végül az a kérdés, hogy megtaláljuk-e az előválasztás segítségével a legjobb jelöltet, hát itt elfogult vagyok, de tényleg azt hiszem, hogy egyrészt Karácsony Gergely nagyarányú győzelme a baloldali előválasztáson, vagy az előválasztás első fordulójában eléggé egyértelművé tette, hogy itt van mögötte egy jelentős társadalmi támogatottság. Megmutatta azt, hogy nem csak az számít, hogy melyik párt mekkora, mennyi ember tud mozgósítani, milyen a networkje, milyen a társadalmi beágyazottsága, hanem az is, hogy van egy olyan jelölt, aki nem csak kompetenciát mutat, de karizmát is mutat, akinek a személyes vonzereje képes megmozgatni az embereket, akinek van egy sztoria, Gergő esetében ez a falusi srác, aki feljött a nagyvárosból, majd eljutott Budapestre, megismerte, beleszeretett, kitanulta a szakmát először szakmai oldalról, aztán belekóstolt a politikába, és ott is sikereket ért el, és most úgy tűnik, hogy végre a 2010 utáni magyar politika történetben először egy olyan, tényleg azt mondanám, hogy történelmi jelentőségű siker lehetőség előtt áll, ami korábban nem adódott senki számára, hiszen Budapest főpolgármestere az a legnagyobb közvetlenül választott tisztség. Ez az, amire közel 1,5 millió ember szavazatával döntjük el, hogy ki a legalkalmasabb, és ő az, aki személyében is legitim lesz arra egyrészt, hogy vezesse a város, másrészt arra, hogyha máshogy nem legalább szimbolikus politikai értelemben, de végre egy ellensúlyát képezze a központi fideszes hatalomnak. Úgyhogy azt hiszem, hogy az előválasztás eddig egyértelműen sikere azoknak, akik ezt szakmailag előkészítették, megálmodták, sikere azoknak, akik részt vettek benne, akár szervezőként, akár résztvevőként, választóként, és reméljük, hogy a második forduló is siker lesz, és azzal a lendülettel még inkább megerősödve képesek leszünk arra, hogy Budapesten elindítsuk a változást, ami aztán kihat az országra, és ki tudja, kihat az egész régióra, vagy kihat egész Európára is. Köszönöm szépen a figyelmeteket!
Köszönjük szépen, és forradalmat kérem, hogy helyezzenek itt el akkor székeket. And I invite you to come upstairs and we'll have a short discussion. Can you hear me? Yes.
Can you see us?
Yes. So thank you so much for these wonderful presentations. If I can have a note, I think it was apparent that two people are after victory, one is still in campaign mode. That's I think very exciting. And again, thank you all for these wonderful presentations. We will be talking English, and Bent, of course, feel free to respond in Hungarian for our Hungarian audience. I will just have one very difficult question, and then I will give the floor to the audience, so our colleagues can already prepare the microphones, because we only have 30 minutes. And my question is basically to the two of you is, you know, in Budapest we have a mayor, Mr. István Tarlós, who has been the mayor for some time, since 2010. He is more popular than Fidesz here. He's polling at 40 to 45%. And of course, Budapest is, in many ways, like your city, is a capital city, but also has some parts like you described. So my very quick question is, what's your suggestion? What is the one campaign element? What is the one idea that you would have from your campaign, or your ideas to Hungary? Of course, it's in a way a fun question, so you can say and think you want. And to Bence, my question is, what do you think Gergely Karácsony can learn from some of these examples? How important are these examples? What is something that we can learn? And you can respond briefly, and then we'll have the audience, whoever wants to start.
Well, I probably don't know the situation in Budapest that well that I can make a very precise comparisons, but and I have the feeling that the situation is slightly different, because there is definitely a reason why he has such a high support here in Budapest. In Bratislava, what was quite clear, and over the years it became even clearer, was that the city was basically neglected. And people could see it on their daily quality of life, that the standard of living in Bratislava is not a standard we would expect from the capital city of European Union. So that was one of the triggering points for the change, which was somehow underlying message of the campaign. The other thing was, and that's maybe something which is connected with the national politics, that most of the mayors we had in Bratislava since 1989 were people for whom it was a political retirement, basically. Quite a few of them didn't even make it to the second term, which means that people were not happy with neither of them, basically. And they didn't do anything significant. You can't even remember what did that or what did that guy. So apparently this victory of Matúš Valló was part of the change of the mindset in the whole country, that we need new generation of politicians. We need people who are European, who are somehow looking at the politics and the management of public resources differently.
Thank you so much.
Milos?
I would say from a different angle, just be close to the people, start your campaign as soon as possible, and rely on direct contact with people. I mean, do your door-to-door, meet your people on the streets, on the squares, by the markets, wherever people are, and just tell them your story. Tell them who you are, where you are, collect the data about your people, come back to these people, and just get your votes. But do it as soon as possible. Don't do it 3 months before the elections like everyone else. Just show that you were different. And this is something that really succeeded for our candidates who were with people who actually won their seats or their mayorship even in some other cities, because they're different, but also they show to the people that they are with them all the time and they are for them.
I think there are two things we have learned already. First is the importance of doing the math, as Gio said, and the other is building a coalition. We almost done with that, but we have to improve our campaign on two fields. One is this very grassroots logic, door-to-door and so on, and the other one is what was that? Oh yeah, I very liked this team value. So I would like to see a team Karácsony in Budapest, and I think that we can do it. All of the voters will find their most preferred parties somewhere below the line, but to build a new brand around the candidate himself is, I think, would be very useful for us too.
Thank you, and we still have 30 minutes. I have a lot of questions, so I'm happy to ask them, but I thought I would ask at this point the audience if they would like to jump in, ask questions, either in Hungarian or in English. I see 2 questions there. Actually, 3 questions on this side. Let's collect 4 questions. They keep coming.
May I ask it in English or
Sure.
Hungarian?
And which
Then
would you like?
I ask it in English just to respect our guests. So I'd like to take a question for Bence, because before the question I'd like to announce something that Bernie Sanders is probably the most significant politician announced that he runs for presidency. He's probably the most popular politician in the entire world. And actually he's a very great experience, he shows a very great example, because he returns back to the everyday problem of the people. He returns back to topics that never anybody deal with in the United States history. For example, defending the rights of the employees, defending the rights of the labor unions. He was invited to labor union strikes, and he attended labor union strikes and employee rallies. And actually, he was a trailblazer, and he was a pioneer, because yes, I really supported the strike. And actually, he was a pioneer because he did not really care about strategy, and he did not really care about tactics, because democratic socialism and democratic socialist narrative was actually a very underrated narrative in the United States before, and he never really cared about being an underdog. He never cared about being an underrated person.
I respect Bernie Sanders a lot. Is there a question?
Yes, and I'd like to ask you to come up with the solutions and come up with the agenda that you represent, because I think it is the most important, not the maths, not the strategy, not the tactics. I think it is about the narrative, it is about the project, it is about the plan, and I'd like to ask you to make it sure what makes you the difference, because leftist tendency is very important. I very respect it. I think you are the best in the Hungarian political picture, but I'd like you to present it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And maybe when we answer, I can ask the 2 of you to talk. I mean, we heard more maybe about the Mozsar program, but what was the ideology or the narrative, or if there was a political ideology or a narrative in Warsaw, what that was and how important that was. Maybe when we get to answer that, you can jump in there. Next question.
Nekem egy sokkal szimpább kérdésem volna. Zaraja Rovához. Általán mutatott képek között volt egy plakát, amin Matusvalló volt látható két szövetségesével. És mindhárom férfi nyakkendő nélkül kigombolt színben volt látható. Ez nyilván nem véletlen, hanem tudatos imázsépítés üzenete volt. Erről kérdezem, hogy konkrétan mi volt az.
Amit be kell látni, hogy valamilyen szinten igaz. Ugyanakkor Zóra beszélt arról, hogy iszonyatosan fontos lenne számunkra egy olyan új politikusi generáció felépítése, amely például többek között külsejében, küldetésében, kommunikációjában és personális közelségében egy teljesen más képet mutat, mint amilyen mondjuk például Tarvós István, nagyon sajnálom, hogy most őt nevesítenem kell, de ő inkább egy politikusi típus, ami valóban nagyon népszerű Magyarországon. Mi lehet akkor ennek az oka? Kinek van szüksége erre az új típusú generációra, és akkor versus meg mi történik a magyarokkal, tehát mi valami sajátos állatfajta vagyunk?
Köszönjük szépen, és ott az úrnak még volt egy kérdés.
Köszönöm. Én kifejezetten Toldai Bencétől szeretnék konkrét kérdéseket, vagy kérdésekre választ kapni. Itt Bence, te kijelentő módon beszéltél a második fordulóról, közben pedig a szövetségeseitek, az MSZP-sek közül ketten is hát feltételes módba tették ezt a második fordulót a nyilatkozataik során, ilyen elejtett mondat szintjén. Hogy ehhez kapcsolódik a kérdésem, hogy ki tudjátok-e belőlük sajtolni a második fordulót mindenképpen, vagy előfordulhat olyan helyzet, hogy ők győznek és nem tartják meg a második fordulót. Ez esetben, ha ez a helyzet állna fönn, akkor támogatnátok-e promóciós szinten legalább egy civil kezdeményezésű öntevékeny előválasztásnak a reklámozását, ami valamikor a nyár végén ősszel lehetne, amikor már kiderül, hogy nem lesz nyári második forduló, és hogy ebben mi a véleményed a preferenciális módszer alkalmazásáról, illetve hát nyilván akkor nyitott jelölt garnitúra rára vonatkozik ez a preferenciális szó. Köszönöm szépen.
Thank you. We will have a second round if we have time. But now I think I will, besides the fourth question, which concerns specifically Danza, I will ask each of you to comment because I collected three issues. The narrative, what is the narrative, how important that is, the image and style, how important that is, and the whole generational aspect, if that is something that was, and Milos, here I will ask you to talk specifically about the Warsaw elections when you respond. I don't know whoever wants to start.
So as I said before, the very basic of the entire Team Balo and Plan B was the Plan B itself. And the Plan B itself is very, very detailed plan for how to change Bratislava into a city of 21st century. So that was the basic narrative, and it had a lot of different aspects. But maybe to me, one of the most important was that we've been really trying to look for the identity of the city. So basically to give people something to identify with. And that is very much connected with the issue of image and the issue of, how the people appeared. Because it was not by accident that I put a picture of Jon Gnar in my presentation, because I have the feeling that if there is one important quality of those new leaders people are desperately looking for in the politics nowadays, it's their ability to live on the border of different worlds. So basically the ability to connect the different communities and people from different backgrounds. So people, they are able to deal with the world of politics, but at the same time they don't look like the traditional politics, and they can deal with completely different communities. Matúš Valo, he, for example, is a member of very, very popular pop band in Slovakia, apart from being a successful architect and now the mayor. So this type of identity, you know, Jan Gnar was an extreme, but that's why I showed that. So this ability to live on the edge of different communities and different identities, to me, is one of the key competences of the new leaders.
Sure. So about the message and about the program. So Zora showed you the people without ties, but you know, our message, I think, was even more radical. I would say our candidate, he was wearing a T-shirt and he was under a rainbow umbrella. So it was like, I would say, but yeah, definitely what we're trying to show. But now we're talking really about the campaigning and the kitchen. Yeah, the candidates, our candidates, they didn't wear ties, like no ties on billboards, no jackets on billboards. This is just the way we try to show them that they're closer to the people. This is also who we are. This is the image of our party vis-a-vis law and justice, vis-a-vis peace, who are all these serious and very, very sad people, and we are not. So of course we wanted to show something different. We are showing, as Mozsar, we're also always trying to show the smiling face of Polish society. We are the party of minorities, we are the party of women, we're known as a party of women. Majority of our, not majority, but our leadership almost is women, so we're trying to show this different type. So in campaign you need to use of who you really are. Like you really need to tell your real story. You cannot pretend that you are something else. You cannot pretend that something that you are not. So also coming to the question, back to the question about the generation. You know, sometimes you have a great candidate who was a mayor maybe 4 years ago, and he is 70 years old. Like he was great. You just use it. You just use his great. You just use the great things he did, and you are not. You shouldn't like really force yourself to find someone young and cool, because if you have just a great candidate.
Bernie Sanders.
Exactly. No, exactly. Like so. This is the issue. Like be natural. I believe like people really feel if you are natural or not, especially the younger generation. If you are pretending that you are something that you are not, like we're not going to buy it, especially younger voters. So if you have a young candidate who feels good without sleeves, who feels good without tie, just use it. But if you have a 70-year-old professor who is liked by the audience because he is a 70-year-old professor, just put him as a professor. Maybe this is the key to the success. And about the program, just very briefly. So first of all, our program in Warsaw, because we are specifically about Warsaw, was still first and foremost about Poland. So the first message was, we here in Warsaw, we are protecting Poland, full stop. You know, we are here to stop peace. And of course, peace is saying you have nothing to offer, you are only saying you are anti-peace. We are. Like this is the first thing we are, and this is something that our voters want us to be. For our voters, the rule of law, protection of the constitution, democracy, starting point. But of course, there are many other things to that. I would say our main program-wise, it was mostly in Warsaw about the public transport. Warsaw has an amazing public transport system. We're very proud of it. It's cheap, it's efficient. We really like it. We have only two lines of subway, but there are two more being developed. So but believe me, like Warsaw people are very proud of our public system, but still, it was all about public system, how to make it better. Also, the peace candidate was making it. He promised like, I will do like 5 more subway lines. We're like, amazing, but you're crazy. So we had to play their game, because they are talking a lot of populistic things in their program. So, but we were playing also their game, just showing and explaining. Okay, we will do that because we care about this topic, but what they're saying is impossible. Plus, for us as Nowoczesna, of course, social issues and protection of minorities. This was very important. The clear signal we gave, running a deputy mayor candidate being openly gay person, and taking care of these issues. This was very important for us, and of course super uncomfortable for peace candidate, because he cannot fish in this point. This was our message. Yeah.
Just like one funny remark regarding the image, when we talk about people without ties and suits. I think for Mateusz Wałęsa the challenge was just the opposite. He had to convince those people who want to see politicians in ties that from time to time he can also wear a tie and he can look like a serious politician, not an arrogant hipster architect. So, yeah, but it's really true. In the first focus groups he did at the beginning, he came out as arrogant, hipster, not able to be in a serious politics. So basically, it's always about the balance.
Yeah, it's a pretty familiar situation to me. But concerning Tamás' question, I didn't want to provoke my liberal friends, but I'm absolutely for strike and promoting trade unions. And I'm not the and I'm not the guy who will ever say that local politics is ideology free. But we have to admit it's not so ideology based when as national politics. Still, when you have a concept that the city has to be designed around the needs of the people and not around the needs of the power, I think it's a very left-wing thought. And yes, you're right. We shouldn't speak about technical questions, or especially the candidate himself have to concentrate on his program or the program of the people, and we have to improve on that. That's for sure. And now I would change to Hungarian to be very precise. Szóval a második fordulóra vonatkozó kérdést inkább magyarul válaszolnám meg, mert ez tényleg kicsit ingoványos, de és nem tudok az összes szövetséges összeszabályért jót állni. Tekintsük ezt mondjuk egy ilyen taktikai versengés részének. Azt tudom, hogy Karácsony Gergely maga leszögezte, hogy ha rajta múlik lesz második forduló, ő ebben teljesen elkötelezett, és talán egy műhelytitkot elárulhatok, hogy Puzsé Roberttel és a csapatával személyes tárgyalásokat folytatnak, és folytattak már az előválasztás lezárulta után is, hogy megerősítsék a korábban már rögzített kölcsönszándékokat a nyári előválasztási fordulóban, mindazokkal a feltételekkel, amelyek akkor ismerté váltak. Ez egyebek mellett egyébként a civil szervezőknek a bevonása, tehát hogy ugye Robert nem bízik a pártmunkásokban. Rosszul teszi, mert egyébként nagyon korrektül szépen lebonyolították most januárban is ezt a fordulót, vagy január-februárban. Ezzel együtt úgy lesz, ahogy megegyeztek ebben, és én személyesen nagyon támogatom a preferenciális szavazás minél szélesebb körül elterjesztését a párbeszédben. A saját szavazásaink jelentős részét szintén preferenciális logikával folytatjuk, mert azt gondoljuk, hogy ez hozza ki a legjobb, a legkonszenzusosabb, a legtöbbek számára elfogadható és ilyen módon leginkább legitim jelölteket vagy vezetőket. Úgyhogy remélem, hogy ez meghonosodik majd a magyar politikában. Ez a mostani választás szerintem nem ilyen lesz, hogyha a júliusit gondoljuk ez alatt, de lehet próbálkozni, lehet nyomást gyakorolni civil szervezői oldalról, bevonulva a folyamatokba mindenképpen. Köszönöm szépen.
We still have a little time, so if there's anyone else who would like to ask a question besides me, then here is the time to do that. If you don't, then I will ask. Well, first ask Milos, because I have a very important question there that's relevant to Hungary. You have a smallish liberal party with a new message, but you cooperate with an older established party which has its own past, and sometimes you need to differentiate. And that is a very similar situation to what we have here in Hungary. How do you do that? Is there any specific idea, suggestion, or what you can offer to the gentleman sitting to the left of you, who is although not a liberal, but also in your shoes, vis-a-vis a bigger, more established, maybe sometimes from a different standpoint, more problematic ally? What's the trick, first of all? And second, don't your voters punish you for that cooperation? Don't you have voters coming to you saying, well, we liked you before, but now that you go with the former establishment, we leave you? Is that a concern? And my third question, then I'll have a question to Zora Marcinez. My third question is, tell us something about this new leftist party we read about in Poland. Nowoczesna was of course the new thing once some time ago. Now you have another new thing on the left. Is that because of this cooperation? Is that something else? Tell us about that.
So of course it was difficult, and it is difficult to keep your identity if you work with someone who is way bigger than you in all terms possible. So more experience in power, still in power in many of the regions and the cities, have money, have politicians who are prime ministers and many of them ministers. But we just, so first of all we agreed on some common platforms, on some common program, like something that we can agree on. And believe me, there's lots of we agree on, because actually my party, Nowoczesna, we were created in 2015, basically for people who were disappointed with Civic Platform. Because we saw that Civic Platform, after 8 years in power, they became party of what we call lazy fat cats. They didn't really want to do anything, they didn't feel like moving, they were just very comfortable on the fireplace there, just like relaxing, and wanted to be re-elected. So we were like, okay, we have to do something, because we see that many voters of the liberal center are moving away. So we just created this party to attract these voters, and we were successful with that in 2015. So for our voters, for many of our voters, it was kind of, this alliance was natural. This alliance was natural and was needed, so as I told you, we explained them it pretty well, that we need to do it, because if not, peace is going to win. Again, so we need to cooperate, so I don't think we lost many voters then. And then how we differentiate, we still kept on fighting for what we've been fighting for the last 3 or 4 years. So we had our agenda, which is different than Civic Platform. We believe that we are program-wise, platform-wise, different than Civic Platform. We believe, I know it's recorded, but we believe that we have views and they don't. They are the party of an establishment. But there are things that we actually stand for something and we fight for something, and we kept on doing it during the campaigns. We try to attract our voters on the lists. So our voters were still fighting for women's rights, fighting for minority rights, fighting for entrepreneurial rights, because also the entrepreneurship is a big part of our DNA. So just kept being ourselves. And as I mentioned at the end of my presentation, after the election, it looked like it was like a bit maybe too much for our partner. And now we're building a new coalition. We're building a coalition now of 4 or 5 parties. So Civic Platform, Nowoczesna, Social Democrats, the Agrarian Party, and the Greens. So it looks like that. It will be a grand coalition running together for EP elections and maybe also for the parliamentary elections. There is a huge problems. There's a huge problems with that, because we may totally lose our identity there. Because we are afraid that we'll be dominated by the biggest partners, of course, but we'll do everything not to be. We have our plan minimum, for both elections. We have our plan how to keep the party, how to keep being ourselves. But the time will show. We're just learning every day. Being a party is 3 years old, and no one else who is in the party was in parliament before. So we're learning everything. It's a bit difficult, but we are trying. Just my only message is just like really keep your identity, fight for your voters, be with your voters. Like, politics is not anymore only about being in public media, and you know it in Hungary, I guess, right, about public media. Just keep your channels with your voters, build your channels with your voters via social media, via direct contact, via lobbying with the groups who support you, and just in our case, we're trying to survive. So we hope to have some MEPs elected, and then MPs elected in November, and then kind of rebuild our identity, rebuild the strength of the party. And your second question about the Spring Party, which is the newcomer to Polish politics, Wiosna in Polish. Very successful in the polls. They were launched like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, something like that. But they were expected for many years, to be honest. So in 2015, the Social Democrats, the left, because of some strategic mistakes they did, they were kicked out from Polish parliament. They didn't pass the threshold because they were running as basically two different parties instead of one. So no one passed the threshold. They're not in Polish parliament. We're probably the only parliament in Europe without any left-wing party. We are the most left-wing party in the parliament, being the center. We call ourselves like the center. And we are the most left-wing party in the parliament. So there was a huge expectation that something will grow up, and there was this mayor of small town in Poland, Słupsk, who was first openly gay Polish politician, and he was telling for many years, I will do something, I'll create something. And finally he did, a month ago, 3 weeks ago, now this party. It's a great PR product, amazingly directed, with a great cultural program because it's like copy-pasted from our program. We differ a lot in economy because their program is way more to the left. We call it populistic. We believe what they say is populistic. They probably believe it's just social democratic. So I believe they will be successful in the elections to the European Parliament because first of all, they are newcomers. In the case of Polish elections, there's always a newcomer somewhere in the center who is successful in the first elections. This was us in 2015. Other party 5 years earlier. So now it's going to be them. I believe they're going to be successful. They're going to campaign, or we are different. We are not the peace. We are not the other party. We are different. And probably they will get 4 MEPs or something. Probably they will get a few MPs in November. But we'll see what next. I'm just afraid it's just another political product that is basically built around the leader, because there is a leader and no one else. We only know the leader. The name of the party leader is in the name of the party, and we've seen it so many times before, and we've also seen so many times how this type of party collapses. So we'll see. I really hope the best for Polish social democrats, for Polish left side of the political scene. We need it. And it's way better to have this new guy who is young, fresh, European, very pro-European, and not the post-communist left that we had before. I believe he's a good alternative. If we have him in the Polish parliament and he builds a good team, it's great. I just hope that, we don't compete for the same electorate. And we are trying to build our modern center party. And if he is our partner on the left side, it's great, and I wish him success.
Thank you. And before I turn to Benta, probably I won't really have a question, but only if you want to close. I have a question to Zora. So you now have, it's a more political question maybe, you now have a mayor you supported in Bratislava. You also have, as you mentioned, and this is for the Hungarian audience, a person running in the presidential elections, which is due March 16th. And of course the first two go on to the second round, and she now has a chance. She's polling second, third place, or first, second, third place. So a very popular candidate. Does that transform into support for progressive Slovakia, or no? What's the relationship between these independent candidates and the party? That's also, I think, a very important question for the present mayoral candidates here in Budapest.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, and there is no easy answer to that because we only have partial data. But I think, taken into consideration everything I said before, that it's not anymore that straightforward than it was in the past, that you have a candidate and that transforms in the percentage for your party and then you win. And the reason for that is that the political landscape is more complicated, and then we really play with the card or with the demand for new type of politics. Everybody wants, but nobody knows exactly what that should be. So for us, definitely, Bratislava case was the first success. However, it was not success only of progressive Slovakia, but it was success of that part of society which really demand the change. Apparently now, and of course, I think we didn't talk about what happens after you win the elections, but he now has to really prove himself to be good and to perform really well. And we are really having a lot of support mechanism for him to actually succeed. So far he's doing really well. And also we have this presidential candidate which already has far higher support than the party itself. So again, she represents something which goes beyond the political scope of the particular party, but it creates a larger movement. And I think we have to wish for this. On one hand, I totally agree with Milos that I think what now wins the elections is that you are very clear about your values. You are not anymore playing all cards in the game, because people are totally fed up with politicians who are like, let's wait, let's discuss, we don't know, you know, stuff like that. And I think that's one of the key success for Zuzana Čaputova, by the way, because her counter-candidate is exactly like this, and he's going down even though his campaign is 5 times more expensive than her. So basically, I think on one hand, to us it's very important to stick to a certain values and to be very clear about what we represent in the political spectrum, but at the same time be part of a larger change, be in coalitions, be in teams, and basically the success of our competitors is very often also our success.
Thank you. Bence, I leave the floor to you to close if there's nothing you would like to add. Is there a secret strategy for Gergely Karácsony? Tell us how we will win the elections. Okay, that was a trick. That was of course a trick question. And also we're out of time. And of course, our two distinguished guests told us the story that we're yet to say, and we hope Bence or someone else will be able to attend meetings like this and talk about the success in Budapest in 1 year's time. Thank you so much for coming. It was wonderful. We learned, I think, a lot today. Very important and exciting things about Hungary. Stay with us for the next session, és ezt magyarul is el fogom mondani. Maradjanak itt velünk a második részre is. Thank you so much.